Hello, my name is Kathy Eden, and I'm the Associate Director of Pre-Health Advising at University of Massachusetts Amherst. We are a large institution with an enrollment of 26,000 students, and I wanted to talk about strategies for supporting first-year students at large institutions. It's something that I've been working on since I started at UMass in 2014, and I continue to amend our practices around engaging with first year students every year. I just want to encourage you to contact us with any questions, or if you want to request our resources. Um, we'd love to hear from you. I have the slide at the end again, so I'll reiterate that. So it's at large institutions or anywhere really, it's always a balancing act between the needs of students and the resources that we have. At large institutions, there are always hundreds of students who declare an interest in pre-med in their first year. So for example, at UMass Amherst, it's at least 700 students a year, but we only end up with between 150 and 200 applicants every year. So there's definitely some attrition. So it's really not feasible for us to provide one-on-one advising for 700 plus first year students when we know some of those are going to be there's going to be attrition by the choice of the student, but it's also important to reach students early because that's essential to their success. And definitely student groups which can be vulnerable can sometimes be first generation students and underrepresented students. And we feel very passionate about wanting to support the efforts of helping to create a physician workforce that really can meet the needs of our very diverse society. So we really want to support that and encourage underrepresented students and first gen students to follow through with doing what they need to do to become competitive candidates if that's what they decide to do. So we feel that finding ways to support first year students effectively with limited resources is very important to our goals. So I'm going to talk about, there are about 6 ways that we specifically use to target first year students, and they're on kind of a spectrum from less time and resource intensive to more time and resource intensive on the right. And I'm going to start with the less time intensive resources. But before I do that, I wanted to talk a little bit about the mindset of first year students, which has kind of came to me about a year ago after teaching our seminar class for the first time. And I really feel like it's important to know this when you're thinking about designing programmings for first year students. So it seems very obvious, but one thing that really influences their mindset is the fact that they're going through a major life change by transitioning from living at home with their families, attending high school, to living on their own on a big university campus. And they're suddenly in a position to make a lot more decisions on their own, and they're faced with many decisions. So there's a bit of overwhelm. And certainly not all first year students are the same. Some are, adjust much more easily than others. But certainly some are significantly overwhelmed. And so I think it's important to keep that in mind. And then the other thing is that they know they want to go to medical school. They know it's very competitive. They want to do the right things and not make mistakes. And so they do have this fear of making mistakes, in general. And like I said, of course, every first year student is a little different, but I think to a certain extent they all have that fear. So keeping that in mind is important going forward. So the first thing I wanted to talk about were handouts, and one handout that I feel particularly good about is something that we give out to students at their new student orientation in the summer before they begin. And I like it because I've kept the messaging really simple here. There's 3 important things that we want them to do. One, we want them to do right away. Now, we want them to sign up for our email list. Something that they can do, any time between when they get this and when they come in the fall is to visit our first year student webpage, and that QR code at the bottom will take them to our webpage if they focus their phone camera on that. And then in the fall, we want them to speak with a pre-health peer advisor. So I feel this is pretty effective, although we haven't done, formal assessments of this, but I feel pretty good about this. One thing I would change about it is that I feel like the imaging could be a little more reflective of diversity. And, I'm not really crazy about the male image, but the male slot image. But I think it, works well and gets our point across. And for students who can't make it to our information session during new student orientation, I think this is a good substitute to get them the information, the absolute basic that they need. This is a slide this image is from our first year student webpage. So we have specifically designed web content for our first year students. That URL will take you straight to our first year students pages. And Faith Nussbaum, the other advisor in our office, created this graphic, which I think beautifully illustrates the 3 basic things that we want first year students to know that they need to be thinking about. They need to be thinking about their academics. They need to be thinking about at some point getting knowledge of the field. And they need to be thinking about ways that they're going to get engaged on campus and in the community. And I've heard from our peer advisors that they really like to use this with first year students just to give them a reference and a visual to refer back to. So those previous slides were on the easier end of the spectrum of what we do. Now we're getting into the more time and resource intensive. And one of those things is having informal gatherings for first year students in our office. And early in the semester, we have done this with students. And I think it's a good time because first year students are kind of wandering around with not much to do. And they haven't made that many friends yet, and so they're looking for ways to connect. So I think informal gatherings were a great. We had a great turnout. We did it like 3 or 4 afternoons. We did it, I think, between 4 and 6 p.m. And over the 4 days, we had between 150 and 200 students show up, which I think is really interesting because that's how many applicants we have down the road. But it'd be interesting. What I would recommend doing is having a sign-up sheet. So I didn't take students' names and capture their information in that way. But we did keep it pretty informal, and I think that was important. We had some simple snacks, just cookies and lemonade, and kept a casual atmosphere. We asked peer advisors to be there so they could help us answer individual questions from students. And we wanted students to to know where we were, so they came to our office and to just kind of get to know where we are and know that we're, nice people who aren't gonna, be mean or criticize them. So I think, though, that served the purpose quite well, and I would recommend doing this, and this is something that I would like to continue doing in the future. Another more time and resource intensive option is having a peer advising program. We had a little bit of an advantage in the fact that our college started a peer advising class, and they allowed any departments who wanted to start using peer advisors. They each gave them a few seats reserved for students who they chose to be peer advisors in that class. It was a semester-long 1-credit seminar class, so it met once a week. It meets once a week, and this is the book that the curriculum was based on for that class. Students Helping Students by Fred Newton and Stephen Ender. And so in addition to that class, the requirements that we had to put into peer advising was obviously we had to go through a selection process. I have an application. If you're interested in that, I'm happy to send it to you. I think it's probably more information than you actually need. I would simplify it just to streamline the process of reviewing applications, but I'm happy to send you what we have. We had to do a little bit of additional training before students just on pre-med specific things. I mean, we usually chose juniors, but some sophomores and some seniors who had a, good basic understanding, but there are always, there's always more information that they need, and they need ongoing guidance. So those are the requirements that we needed to put into it. But the benefits, so for the first, we've been doing this for 4 years, but this was the first year that we've used our student information platform, advising platform, to kind of be able to document it, and students were able to make appointments with peer advisors through this platform. And we actually were able to provide one-on-one advising for 400 first-year students. So that is absolutely significant. The other benefits to peer advising are being able to, through this platform, the peer advisors could document what they talked about with students. So when the students come and meet with us during their sophomore year, we can look at what they talked about with the peer advisors and, start from there. And then it's always, it's nice to be able to use the peer advisors to kind of do messaging campaigns for, whatever you think is really important that the first year students need to know. Sometimes, an important message that they should get during the first semester is that, really they don't need to accomplish everything in that first semester, and just getting acclimated to campus and making some friends and figuring out how they might, one thing they might want to get involved in that semester is really enough, and that they don't have to do everything all at once. So these are some of our peer advisors. We have their pictures posted on our website with their brief bios, and first year students might have an affinity for one student because of their major or some other thing that they relate to. And so, it's nice to have this information up. So the most time and resource intensive is our seminar class for first year students, which is a 1-credit class that meets for an hour and a quarter every week. And we've taught it 2 semesters. We've taught it in the spring semester of this year, it was interrupted. It went from in-person to remote. And then last year in the spring, it was taught fully in person. And, there's some pros and cons. I mean, we could only, enroll a small number of students, about 30 students. But we were able to spend so much time with those students and really inform them well that, we felt like it is a worthwhile thing to keep doing. And, as we continue, hopefully we will find ways to come up with assessments to really justify continuing to do it. We strategically set it on a Friday afternoon at 2:30, hoping that might limit the number of students who wanted to do it. And I think that is actually true. And we did get some very motivated students, but because we taught it in the spring, we could look at fall semester grades, and we didn't have all overachievers and, all super achievers. And, we wanted to have a mix, and we did, just from students self-selecting into it. I've realized now, after having it been taught 2 semesters, that it's a great source for peer advisors down the road because they get such good in-depth information. And then some other benefits for the students were that they had, access in a small group to speakers. They could get over their anxiety about approaching professors and researchers um, and really get just a opportunity to kind of work through that fear and be able to approach professionals in that way. And this is kind of where I learned about, the main things that, first year students are really grappling with. And I think that was really valuable for me. So, it was a time intensive thing to do. But now that it's rolling, it's, not as time intensive as far as class planning and things like that. So this is the general overview of the syllabus. Weeks 1 through 4, we just did introductions and talked about academics, the importance, how to get good academic support, and how to, use research opportunities to engage more deeply in academics. Then in the middle weeks, we talked about gaining knowledge of the field through patient care, and we had panels of students who were trained as CNAs talk about their work experience. We had panels of EMTs and then speakers from the field. And then in the final weeks, we talked about how to build, interpersonal competencies through community engagement, both campus engagement. So we had representatives from campus groups and organizations, and then we had speakers from community service organizations come. And I'm happy to share the more detailed syllabus with you in full, so just send me an email. So again, I just want to encourage you to reach out to us with any questions or requests for resources, or if you wanted to collaborate with us in coming up with ways to formulate assessment tools for some of these programs. We'd love to hear from you and connect with you. So thank you for coming, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Take care.